Okay, I think we can get started. I'm Joanna Ono. I'm the interim gallery director for the Riverside Art Center. I'd like to thank everyone for joining the Riverside Art Center for an artist talk with Mayumi Lake and Stacia Yeapanis, coinciding with their two-person exhibition, The Bigger the Fear and Despair, on view in our FlexSpace. Both artists have very extensive CVs, so I'll read these brief bios to introduce them. Mayumi Lake is a Chicago-based artist originally from Japan. Her installations, photography, and video art have been exhibited in solo exhibitions at the Yoshinaga Gallery in New York, Chicago Artists Coalition, Witzenhauser Gallery in the Netherlands, and Cornelis Plesser Gallery, Germany, as well as in numerous group exhibitions, including the Hyde Park Art Center in Chicago, Carrie Sechrist Gallery in Chicago, Paci Contemporary in Italy. Lake is the recipient of several grants from Chicago's DCASE, the Illinois Arts Council, and the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Her residencies include the Chicago Artists Coalition Hatch and Vault, Roger Brown, Skowhegan, and a residency in Krems, Austria. In addition, she has published 2 monographs from an Israeli press. Her art is in the permanent collections of the Art Institute of Chicago, the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, Asia Society, and Facebook. Lake holds an MFA and a BFA in photography from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Stacia Yeapanis is a Chicago-based artist, interdisciplinary artist, educator, and writer. She explores the relationship between repetition, desire, suffering, and impermanence in cross-stitch embroideries, remix videos, temporary collages, and improvised sculptural installations. Yeapanis is an adjunct associate professor in the Department of Fiber and Materials Studies at SAIC, where she earned her MFA in 2006 and won a Marian Kritska Excellence in Teaching Award in 2020. Her first monograph was published jointly by Aperture and the Museum of Contemporary Photography in 2009. Yeapanis was a 2011 to 2012 artist in residence and a 2012 to 2013 mentor in residence at Chicago Artists Coalition's Bolt residency. Her solo exhibitions include shows at Siena Heights University in Michigan, Heaven Gallery in Chicago, Indianapolis Art Center, Robert F. DiCaprio Art Gallery in Palos Hills and Kent State, Stark, North Canton, Ohio, Finlandia University in Michigan, and material exhibitions in Chicago. Stacia was the spring 2021 artist in residence at Zocalo Apartments in Houston, Texas. Now, to begin with, we're going to start out with some questions. I'd like to turn the camera back to our artists, and I'd like to begin with the title of this exhibition. The title is The Bigger the Fear and Despair, which was a phrase Mayumi used in describing historical references and her use of mythical heavenly flowers in her art. Stacia, let's begin with you. Tell us how you felt the phrase resonated with the creation of your own art.
Yeah, we had been going back and forth about titles, and when I read that in Mayumi's work or in her statement, it really struck me because both of our work is very, as you see, just from what you're looking at and then the images, it's very decorative, it's colorful, it's bright, it's accumulative. There's, it's really easy to look at it and think about fun and pleasure and happiness. But I think we're both coming at our work thinking about the way that this kind of aesthetic can be solace, right? It's a way to get through the difficult times. And so in the reference that she was talking about, and maybe I'll let her speak to it in a moment, but it just struck me that what humans do when things are really bad, I mean, there's many things that humans do, obviously, we don't all react to difficulty in the same way. But one of the things that we do is like put on a bright face and try to be even happier, or try to like, and that can be both escapist, but it can also be like an effective way of getting through the difficulty. So that's what I relate to in it.
And Mayumi, the pieces in this exhibition are from your Unison series, which incorporates these flowers. Can you explain the symbolism of the flowers and the Japanese traditions you integrate into your art?
Yeah, actually that Unison, so Unison is based on this mythical flower that people used to admire, and then it used to believe is to be bloomed in the afterlife world. It's like a 7th century to 10th century, and it's kind of forgotten about that. But it's that Stacia was saying that when I started to make this work was I was at 2016, and when there was a huge political chaos thing, and then it was just a constant fear about what's going to happen, and then at the time still is, but especially for me as an immigrant, like how that world is going to be changing. So then hosoge, so this mythical flower's name is hosoge, that ancient people just use this bright color and then decorate this using the imaginary flower in everywhere, mostly sacred place, and then bigger their fear at the time, because it's also they had a political chaos and a natural disaster, and then they have a little control about what's going on in the world. It's kind of like us today too, but then they would just more their fear that that about their their world. They start to decorate that everything is much more bright color, so many stuff. It's almost like a more the better, and it's kind of like that sync to the what both me and Stacia would do. Just that we have this is still like after like a 10,000 after like 1,000 years, is that nothing has been changed. We still have a fear about a lot of things. So we kind of use our fear as an motivation to just accumulate layer more and more. So it's kind of like for me, it's thinking even 21st century that we still act exactly same as how people reacted to world in the ancient world.
Great. Stacia, your installation that you're sitting right in front of, titled The Bounty and Burden of Caretaking, it's a visual macro-micro treat with its shiny, colorful, swirling elements. And but then when you get closer to it, you see thousands of tabs from aluminum cans and cat can lids and massive amounts of handwork that you've done. But the title speaks of something a little darker. Can you tell us a little bit about the meaning of all the materials in this piece and how this piece evolved?
Yes, thank you, Joanne. So the work, let me see if I can give you a little pan. So as Joanne said, part of what's happening, I'm going to point, if you can see right here, these are the lids to my cat food cans. They are hand embroidered. And then on the ground, we have also quite a lot. So you can see in one of the squares, Liz is showing you details of the work. And then what's hanging down is these are aluminum can tabs, so from beverages. So both of these things started to accumulate when I was on residency in Zocalo. Mayumi knows I love the sound. Thank you. And on the one hand, it started because there was no recycling at this residency. And so I went with very little materials. And I began to accumulate materials at the residency, but I have a history of working with the materials that are sort of come out of the process of everyday living. So I'm interested in the fact that these things are garbage, but not just garbage, that it's the results of processes of taking care of our bodies, or at least responding to desire that originates in our bodies. And so for me, it's both the feeding of my cats and the excess waste that's created by taking care of them. And I'm interested in this ambivalence, right? Where the material can both signal excess and be sort of making you think about how much waste we produce as humans, but it's really not, it's not just about that, right? It's also about the way that that waste can sometimes be a signal of love, right? Like the accumulation of these cat food cans specifically, show, it's like this visual evidence of taking care of my animals, they're two elderly cats. I took them on residency with me. One of them has kidney disease, and so she eats nonstop, right? Like her body kind of can't hold on to nutrients. And so it's like, and really is this excess thing where I'm like feeding her over and over again, and she's going to the bathroom. And so that whole process that's sort of behind the work is really what I was meditating on while making the work. So it's a very repetitive process. All my work is the accumulation of repetitive acts. So, and I think of it as like tangible, physical processing of the material of our lives. And so that means both the physical material that we produce in our lives, but also the sort of the emotional material, the emotional experience, the lived experience. So there's this embodied processing through the repetition. And I should also say that at the time I was on residency, I mean, it's not a new problem, but I really was listening to a lot of news about climate change and thinking about having a lot of anxiety about the virus, and being in Texas where when I first got there, I was not vaccinated and there was no mask mandates anywhere. And so there's a lot of anxiety, personal anxiety, but anxiety that is sort of representative, I think, of a lot of people's experience, sort of processed through the repetition. I'll stop there because I think I could say more, but I think other questions might get to that.
Mayumi, I'm thinking about your pieces, resonance and droplets. So looking at how they're created with all the different layers and all the different elements, they look flat, but when you get up closer, you see that it becomes almost three-dimensional because of all the different pieces that you've put on it. Can you tell us about your use of photography as the basis of these, and how it works conceptually and as a pragmatic material?
Yeah, so my the formal education is all photography and then also moving image. So it's like it's all two-dimensional or four-dimensional. It doesn't have any depth. So then so it is ongoing challenge for me that I'm, when I start to do this unison, that I really wanted to extend my 2D photographic world into 3D. So it's so that it's still like a 2.5 dimension. So that's how I code. But I used photographic techniques that that's all, that's the most I'm familiar. So original source is little girl's antique kimonos, which is mostly made in a pre-World War II. And then kimono is those kimonos covered with those flowers. Then I scan it with a scanner and a high resolution, and I put it in a computer, and then I printed it, and then I'll hand cut. So I brought little thing that so this is a photo. Just the back side is the inkjet paper, and then also put like the gold leaf. So this is all tiny stuff. So then I mainly work on a floor in my studio. So just start to, sometimes I have sketches sometimes I have an idea, sometimes I have no idea what's the shape's gonna be. So I'm just kind of, this is a completely opposite process from the me as when I'm doing a photographic work, because it's the photographic work is a work from the opposite. It's like a subtractive process. You picture from the end and then you just go backwards. But this is, so this unison work is kind of additive. It's like a more close to painting. So you just add more, and then I just kind of like let the, my hands to decide what the shape will look like. And then, also then I mixed there was a shiny stuff, sparkles and plastic stuff, and then also hair, because that's so this is a unison. Hosoge is in ancient the flower things that I'm borrowing. Then this those plastics color the artificial object in reflect my own childhood in the 70s and 80s. So yeah, in terms of process, it works completely different way than my photographic process. So it is still every piece give me a new discovery. I'm still learning how to make the things in 3D. Yeah, so this is like this is how I start to make the things, and then sometimes change the shape, and then but at this point nothing is glued. It was just script things, and then this one is a reference image for the resonance piece, which is or the Japanese court musics, the performers, child performers costume.
Great. Stacia, I'm going to make you walk around a bit now. Let's talk about the piece titled "I'm in Love with My Own Boring Life," which is such a great title. Can you tell us about this obsessive process that you've done to make this piece?
So this textile is actually cross-stitch embroidery. Get as close as I possibly can with the computer. So for those of you, if you're not familiar with cross-stitch, it is just a repetition of an X, and it's often executed on a gridded fabric where the holes are already part of the woven structure. I chose cross-stitch specifically because what I'm interested in when I work with stitch is thinking about stitch as a pause, a breath, an object of meditation. So I'm interested in the way that stitch, I kind of say on some level, even though there's many aspects of the history of stitch, like in different parts of the world and throughout different cultures, I'm particularly interested in stitch as a way to slow down and as a meditation. So this work took over a year, and each line, each stitched line takes about 45 minutes to complete. So there was a period of time where I was using that as my meditation process. So I would sit and stitch a line, and that was the time that it took to stitch the line, was the time of that sitting. And I do that because, I am a meditator, but I'm also a very anxious person, and I've sort of been easing myself into slowing down and sitting still for about five years or so. And so there was a period where I really couldn't sit still because I'm a type A personality, recovering perfectionist. I'm productive. I want to be productive all the time. And so, stitching was like the closest I could get to being still. I was still making something. I was still creating something, but the goal in creating it was not so much about the finished object. So I didn't even really know where it was going. So it's why the simplicity of it is just these straight lines, right? Just the process of doing it over and over again. This is it's very time consuming, but even that word time consuming is kind of a problem because it implies that what we're trying to do is eat time up, when really what I'm trying to do is actually slow time down by using my attention and the stitch as a way to do it. So, I think the title, just to go back to the title, I'm in love with my own boring life. For me, a big part of meditation is like training myself to be comfortable with what's in front of me, right? Whatever it is, right? And sometimes that is the boredom of everyday life, right? Like nothing exciting is happening in here. And every day I feed my cat and then I go to the bathroom and then I make some food. Then I go to work, and I'm interested in being in love with that life, even if sometimes I'm really not in love with that life.
Mayumi, both of you actually, both of you have created art that involves really vibrant color, and it has both visual and kinetic movement. And Mayumi, I know you weren't able to attach the motors to spin your gorgeous kaleidoscope pieces due to the structural limitations of our tin ceiling. And we thank you for being such a pro in adjusting your installation. But why don't you show us all how they spin?
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Oh, wait. Okay. Oh, wait. Sorry, we just some audio problem. Yeah, so then, John, thanks for the mentioning that. So then, and I just, but I also, then this is the state that I keep seeing it when this piece is in my studio. So it's both format is a right format to me. But so that this when it's if there is a motor, if it's a motor version, so this will be keep spinning like kind of the difference for this piece is the baby's nursery that there is a different images that were shown earlier, and then also the other so that's the colorful the baby nursery things that I had and when I was a baby over my bed. Of course, I don't remember, but I kind of vaguely remember from seeing the photo that my parents took. So yeah, so this one, that's why it's supposed to spin like that. And also the other difference for this is the IBM's quantum computer Q, which so this shape is kind of more defined to the IBM quantum computer Q. So I thought it might be interesting to connect what baby will see in the beginning of their lives, but also they just came back from I believe reincarnation. So that when newborn baby, they just came from the other side of the world, and then so they must hold all those knowledge before they're born. And this IBM quantum computer Q is just to put so much the people's intelligence. So I thought it'd be interesting to difference both end of the baby's brain and then the high up technology brain. So
I'd like to ask both of you this same question concerning your process and how you create the pieces. I know that Stacia, you've installed pieces in multiple places, and so how do you figure out how you're going to install? Even if you're using the same elements, they end up becoming totally different pieces. And the same question for you, Mayumi.
So yes, the way that I have come to work on these sort of site responsive installations is that it's important. I kind of separate out the two parts of the process in my mind. So the creating of all the repeating elements. So the stitching of the cans, right? And then the linking of the tabs together with jump rings or split rings. I usually pick a process that is like, it starts from the material, it's repetitive in nature. It allows me to sort of calm down. So there's like a personal benefit to the processes. They have to be pleasant enough, but sometimes when things start out unpleasant, they become pleasant, like stitching into hard metal was not always pleasant at the beginning, but now it's like very easy. And so I sort of separate out that process of like making these repeating units that are based on material and have, where I'm both responding to like the physical properties, the materiality, but also either the personal meanings or the collective cultural meanings of the materials. But in that process, I'm not having a vision of the final piece at all. There's no, and if I start to, I usually will try to counterbalance that in some way. So I do the repetition again as meditation. I do the repetition and I try to steer myself away from envisioning it. So like, I really think of that part of the process as not art. I mean, it obviously all overlaps, but like, that's not the art making exactly. That is the coping with anxiety, right? Or the processing my experience, right? There's like a personal, spiritual, private benefit. Okay. But then I have all this material, right? And so I take that material into different spaces, and then the arranging of it is mostly improvised. So, the pieces on the ground are not connected. And actually I'll do can actually pull parts of the installation up and drop it back down. And so what that means is those pieces can get arranged and rearranged in different ways, in different spaces. The hanging part is actually all one piece and attached together, which is not always how I work. Sometimes the parts are more separated, allowing for more flexibility. But even the way this is hung, I exhibited it when I was in residency at Zocalo. And the aim of that residency was, it was an apartment complex, and I was an artist in residence, and my job was just to make art around the grounds. And so for me, that's perfect because I make temporary installations and then they can change. So I installed this multiple times around the grounds. I was using things like, plant hangers, shepherd's hooks that you would put in your garden so that you could hang hanging plants, and various other things I found at like the Home Depot. So that was one installation. I also put this on the ground, and then I think, the cat food cans were separate from the can taps for quite a long time. And then usually what happens is, this is an improvisation and it will never look exactly the same, but I practice, right? So I arrange it and rearrange it in my studio. It's like, I always use the metaphor, I'm not a musician at all, but like the metaphor works for, someone who does jazz improv. Like, they don't not practice, right? They know how to use their instrument. They know how to play their instrument. And that is because they practice, but then they may show up with another group of people and be responsive in the present moment to what is happening. So that's where the improv comes in. So I try to make the sculptural installations have that element of improvisation in them. So this piece, I'll install it again somewhere else. It will not necessarily look like this. It will have, other components, or it will be on the ground, or it will be in the center of the room as opposed to in the corner. So it also keeps installation much more exciting to make that the installation. I mean, I definitely have made artwork where installing it is like the worst part of making it. And I decided, sort of practically speaking, I didn't really want my art exhibiting career to be that way or to feel that way. So it's really opened up, bringing the creativity into the gallery or into the exhibition space for me.
So that maybe Stacia, I have a question. So that because it's that, that when we figuring out for this show, and then also when we did a studio visit, it was like I really admired how flexible your piece is. And then although I'm trying to like for that, for my own work, and just not to be like being like a rigid form. But I'm a photographer, so I always think like that work have to be like in this form, and then this is how the. So only like a flexible things that I am allowing at this point for this piece is like sometimes I hang that these are all like individually hang the piece, so I would just that change the arrangement. Depends on where the show location is and how I feel, and that's pretty much all that like an flexibility and aligned to the work to happen. So I'm really admiring like you, because I saw this in your studio, and there was a slightly different format, right? And there was on the wall and the flat, and then when like for the each version, how do you determine? Sorry if it's oh, that's right, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, so when do I know? It kind of depends. Like it really is, when I say site responsive, I think that includes like, what's the installation time? What is the actual architecture of the space? Yeah, how much time do I have? I mean, time is really a big part of it. So like, how busy am I in the rest of my schedule when I have to put a show up, right? So I may or may not draw on things that I've done in the past more heavily, or lean more heavily on, I think here, especially when you're in a show with two people in a small space, I want to be flexible, just as like a working artist working with another artist. And I want to sort of echo against their work. And so, because Mayumi's work is also hanging, I wanted this to hang, but I particularly wanted it to be up high in the same way that Mayumi's pieces were. And I wanted to sort of visually echo some of the things that were happening in her work. But I mean, I don't know. I think I had originally imagined this like hanging out in the center of the space, but also I had to also contend with the fact that, the tin ceiling. I was like, well, that's probably not going to work. So I opted for the corner, but I knew that I wanted it off the wall so that there could be some movement. But then the process of working on the ground, the parts that are on the ground, like that's really a lot like play, right? Like it's like, I remember being a kid and laying out all the blocks, or laying out all the Legos, or like setting up my Barbie house, but never actually playing in it, like doing a floor plan. And so there's some aspect about working on the floor that, I mean, I like to work on the floor a lot, and I like things to not be permanent. And so it really, it's hard. The decisions happen at different times, but I think they're always a balance of like practicality and sort of the thematic, or the, it's like, a lot of people are like, oh, can you take that thing on the floor and put it on the wall? I'm usually like, no, I'm not interested in being on the wall. I'm interested in being on the floor. Like I'm interested in how the floor relates to the body, and how I feel when I'm installing on the floor, and the way that when I'm sitting, it's like I'm a kid, but I'm also like stretching, and it's like, anyway, there's all those aspects, but so it's different every time. And I think what I'll say is that I also was originally trained as a photographer before I started making work like this, and I had all those same expectations, because I learned how to cut a mat and measure it, and everything's got to be perfect, and like make sure the prints are the same and number them, all these like rules, rigid rules. And then like when you try to hang a square thing on a wall, it's like you got to have a level, and you got to make sure and I just decided I hated it. And I was like, this is not fun or interesting to be this obsessed with. And I'm nothing against people who want that. I just want to say this is a personal response where I just wanted to be more playful, and it's like, I'm not an artist who gets paid to make my work. I make temporary things that don't last, so they often don't sell. But so why am I going to do extra work that's unpleasant? So anyway, I come from that too, but what happened was that I got more playful, and it actually benefited. I feel like the work got better than when I was trying to make it all be the same every time, or like come find some perfect iteration and it was only the one. And so now I think conceptually, thematically, I'm just like not that interested in perfection. I'm interested in like picking something that's the opposite of perfection, or accepting the way things are.
Well, you should see the barcode of my piece, because then like it says like that I have all those. I think it's all like coming from the photographic nature. Like it's the D-rings distance between here and here is 13 inches. So then, and then all written in, and so I can. And then also when I'm installing this resonance, you saw that I had like a template, like an installation template. So anyway, so that I'm still like trying to loosen up from like although like when I'm packing the stuff, that's when I miss the frame, the photo, because it's so easier, I'm sorry. But yeah, so yeah, but then maybe in relation to what you just said, like knowing when to stop is very important, and then it is so hard to explain, right? And then I'm trying to explain like people in the past, like a way, you know, so I also work in a floor, right? You know, laying, stop. And then when is I think it's also like in a painters, this is like a similar experience a painter can share, that this is a moment that, you know, that's it. Or like I can go more, right? And then sometimes also like a financial financial limitation.
Yeah, I mean, I think, can everyone hear me? Yeah, the way I respond to that is like, yeah, and that sounds like awful and anguish, like the stress of trying to have a perfect life, and then when you fail, feeling like your life is going to fall apart, right? What I like about my process is like, yeah, if I put something in the wrong place, I can just take it away if I decide I don't like it. And that to me is such a much more interesting and also hard, right? I'm not saying it comes to me easily. It's sort of a practice, right? Like it's like trying to loosen up, you know, whereas I'm not always loose. I'm rigid, and like, you know, when I'm working, when I'm teaching, it's like everything has to be right. And but it's a practice in being like, oh, I'm actually okay if it's not perfect, because I can change it and it will not last, right? So there is sort of this really focusing on that there is no finished state, right?
Great, thank you for that. I'd like to open up the talk to questions from the audience if anyone has them. Feel free to turn on your audio and video, raise your hand, and we can pull you into the conversation. Otherwise, if you'd like to add a question to the chat, please feel free to do so. Actually, why don't we take a question here from Judith?
Yes, I can't get myself out of the dark. But first of all, just huge thank you, Joanne and Liz and Stacia and Mayumi. Just on a very personal note, I know it's a wonky time for everybody. I personally have been mostly self-isolated for 2 years, and I am so hungry to experience installations. And not only are you doing this talk, but you're moving around and moving things, and obviously it's not like being there, but it's the next best thing. So, and I'm a big fan of both of your work. So thank you. Quick question, Stacia, the cross stitch piece, tell me the title. I don't want to mess it up. I want to love.
It's called I'm in Love with My Own Boring Life.
Yes, fabulous title. I'm curious about, there's a piece hung over the piece, and I have thoughts, but I'm just curious your thoughts about how you and why you combined it in that way.
Thanks, it's a good question. So initially the piece is actually from like 2018, the larger back part, and it was in a show called Practice, where the whole, it was also combined with embroideries on, freehand embroideries on meditation cushions. So like I was interested in, like, again, sort of really pulling out that relationship between stitch and meditation. But at that time it was just the back piece, right? There was no front piece. And I think I went, after doing that one large piece and kind of completing it for the show, and then I just wanted to do more, right? Like it is actually like a very, like cross stitching a straight line in one color is such a good meditation. And then when I say meditation, I'll just clarify a little bit more, which is that, yes, like I use the stitch as the anchor, right? So I'm stitching this repetitive X, and then my mind goes somewhere else. Oh, what do I have to do today? Or, oh, why did I say that thing? Or, oh, blah, 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 I'm hungry. And then when I notice, I come back to the stitch and I go, like, notice the thread pulling through the fabric. Notice the color, hear the sound. So it's like really about focusing in. So anyway, I think it really comes down to the fact that I just wanted to keep doing it. And I would say this piece is like one of the only places that you'll really see like straight lines. in my practice. And so I think after looking, it has been hanging over the space where I meditate now, where I sit on my cushion, and I have kind of like my own private like altar with candles, things that I, use to bring me into the ritual of meditating. And that piece has been there for so long, just with stripes. And I had made this other piece where I was kind of playing with the straight lines. And I honestly, just one day I was like, oh, I need to disrupt that a little bit more. And so I sewed it on top, and it's kind of as simple. That was pretty instinctual. But I'd love to hear any thoughts about it.
I love it. I mean, I think it plays with the austerity, and it increases the playfulness and the curiosity. And I just think it's a kind of perfect metaphor for your title. So I love that it's added there. I think it keeps me there longer because there's a curiosity factor in adding that. So thanks. This is really, all of this is so joyful. And Mayumi, also, the work is just stunning.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Catherine, do you have a question?
I don't, but thank you for asking. It's just wonderful to see both people's work, and it makes me long to see them both in person, because clearly they're highly tactile. And we are yearning for stimulation, as Judith said, stimulation of all kinds. And it just makes me want to go get over there and see them. Thank you.
Well, and the show's still up, right? It's up for
March 19th.
March 19th. Yes.
Oh,
So,
yes, please
so
come
everyone
by.
can come by. We're open Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays from 1 until 5. And this, the exhibition is up until March 19th. So please stop by.
It looks like we have a question in the chat.
Yes. Okay. I can, from Jamie Lynn, she writes, congratulations, Stacia and Mayumi, on putting together such a beautiful show, and thank you for sharing your time. Both of your works require states and processes of transition. What role does liminal space play in your works?
That's a really good question, Jamie Lynn. Liminal space. I'm trying to think about like liminal space as like physical space, so like the liminal space of like a doorway. But I guess I don't often think about that quite so much, but I do think about the liminal space of transition, like from one thing to another, quite a lot. And I think about the way, the way that transitions, I'm really interested in how slow change can be, especially change that you're trying to make happen, as opposed to the kind of change that just happens to you, which also usually comes about slowly, but you don't often see all the factors that go into getting to that point. You just see like sort of the moment of explosion where something happens. So I'm kind of always interested, maybe the way I'll think about it is like the moment where the collection and accumulation of material shifts from, because it really is, it's literally piece by piece. It's like one can tab at a time. And so I'll say, like, sometimes I'm walking through alleys and I'm looking in people's recycle bins and I'm pulling things off the top to get a can tab. The origin is, of course, like every LaCroix I drink and then taking the can tab off. So it's like having the moment to moment experience of the consumption and the experience generates this one material. And then that's just like normal, right? Like we don't really think about that too much most of the time. But ultimately, like there's a point where it keeps accumulating like drops of water. And I'm always kind of looking for the moment where that accumulation becomes like transforms itself through the mass, right? So like I'm always interested to, I may be not quite answering your question, so feel free to jump in and redirect me, but I think that I'm interested in the transition of seeing all the individual, like being able to still see the individual parts in the end, but like when do a group of like accumulated details become like a mass? And what does that mean sort of metaphorically, emotionally, spiritually, maybe politically? So anyway, I'll stop there.
I think for me to work with Windows space, so the physically that my studio doorway is small. So the that one time that I was in the phase of the making that like a to go with a title of the show. So also my statement, the bigger the fear, the bigger the or more immersive works get. So then I was in the phase of making a bigger work. Then I one day realized that, oh, it doesn't fit into my studio. You can't leave my studio. So then I, learned how to make like an in work in the parts. But yeah, so then so and I'm also kind of trying to focus like on if the space limitation, I wanted to go like a space in a 3D way. So it's more like expanding in a three-dimensional way until I hit like my doorway size. I had that piece in currently in Hyde Park Art Center. That's the truly my first completely 3D piece, and then I had a near like the freak out moment when I moved when I have to transport the work, the frame, that egg-shaped metal frame was like almost fit to go through my door, and also then my car size, like how much you can transport the material. But anyways, I hope this is the answer to your question. But it's always like there's a way to work around, and then it's like every piece for me is it's a new learning, new discovery, and then also that evoked the more feeling of how much I wanted to not the master, but it's investigate, the more to do in a to see or think my work in a 3D is coming from the photographer's perspective. So yeah.
Okay, this was such a wonderful talk. I want to thank you both. Your artwork was beautiful, and we're thrilled to have it installed in our FlexSpace. And just a reminder that Mayumi and Stacia's exhibition is open until March 19th. So definitely come out to see it in person. It's gorgeous. And with that, I think we can end.
Thank you all for coming to another virtual event.